Live from the Sims Tower in the Robinson Auto Group studio, we are AM 1600 WKKX.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is Whispers, and I get to start the show because I've got Jordan actually doing work for a change, which is so surprising. I know. I just kind of messing with you.
Oh, I grabbed my headphones. They're all tangled up still.
I know. Well, at least they work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both earphones.
Oh,
right?
man. How did you ever rate?
Well, you know, it's in the blood. It's in the genes.
I guess so.
I'll tell you what. It's really cool. My mom's been doing that Ancestry.com.
Uh-huh.
And she's, like, big into it. She does home health. And there's a lady that she takes care of that has her doctorate in genealogy. And, I mean, she's functioning and all that kind of stuff. You know, she has my mom drive her around. But they've been working on the Ancestry stuff. Well, we have one line through my grandfather's side that's like when you get in, like, into England, like in the 700s, is like all royalty.
Really?
Like the whole deal, like Charlemagne, like Holy Roman Empire, all through, like.
See,
that's that's my bloodline on that edge. But like the rest of them, there's not so much.
I think all those aristocrats are on that edge somewhere. See, I come from French royalty. And then somehow we transgressed into like a horse thief and all kinds of others. I'm surprised. I probably have relatives in Australia that were sent on prison ships or something. So I come by some of my more larcenous moments righteously.
Yeah, something like that.
I do.
But we both got the royal blood, and that's what counts right there.
Yeah, only if it comes with a tiara.
I mean, I can buy you one.
Okay.
You know, if you really want. I'm Jordan Cline. She's Lola Miller. Give us a call, 304-214-1600. If you're out of the area, 1-866-514-1600. You're listening to Whispers Radio. Woo!
Get nervous?
For what? Oh, Saturday. I don't know, something like a wedding or something.
Yeah, only that you're, like, officially getting married.
Yeah. I'm actually, like, there's so much stress involved.
Yes.
That I am more looking forward to it being over and going on the honeymoon than I am actually the ceremony.
And you know what? I think most of the time that's the case. I know that most women want the big, beautiful wedding with the dress and the bridesmaids and the big reception. And yet how much of that you really remember is very little, because it's such a bombardment of stuff. You're constantly having to do. Well, you're not having a really huge reception.
Our reception is very picnic style. We're cooking out on the grill, swimming.
That'll be nice. See, but those ones that are at night,
there's big formal deals.
Yeah, 300 guests.
Well, see, even now, even as small and as simple as we're trying to make it, it's still like everybody says, "Oh, it's your day. It's all about you." No, it's not. No, it's not. It's about what your parents think.
Yep.
Exactly. You got to make not only your family happy, but the entire family happy.
Yeah.
Because if you don't,
it's all about the in-laws.
The 2 days surrounding your decision to change whatever they want,
yes, I mean,
is hell.
Absolute misery.
Oh my goodness!
So tell everyone what you got for your bachelor present.
Oh, my guys took me to get a tattoo.
Most people just have strippers and stuff.
Well, see, we're not into strippers. You know, we don't drink. So they took me to get a tattoo, and I got an alien guy on my bicep here. I went to Hot Rod Tattoo. Corey Cook did an awesome job.
It is nice. It's very nice.
Yeah, he did a real good job.
When did you get that done?
Friday.
Oh, so it's still raised.
Yeah, it's still fresh. It's scabbing right now where little pieces are healing.
Think it looks so cool when it's still scabbing like that.
The colors are pretty bright.
Well, and it's raised.
Yeah.
You know, and then when the scab comes out, I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like it did before. My first one was like that because it was on my ankle, and I thought it looked so neat when it was raised up a little bit.
Yeah.
But the only way you can get that is scarring, and I
No. Not worth it.
Nope.
So definitely, I'm promoting this guy, Corey Cook, Hot Rod Tattoo. Go there. He's an awesome guy, and he's a lot of fun to talk to.
That's where
while
I
he's
got
tattooing.
my first two and got all my piercings done, was at Hot Rods.
Yeah, they're awesome. Great, fun group of guys there too.
Yep. It's
our guest.
Yes, our
Our
guest.
guest is Mr. Roy Stemman. Is that correct, Roy? Stemman. Roy Stemman. He's calling, or we're calling him, but he's all the way from England.
That's right. No royal blood in me, though, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm sure if we dig deep enough, you got something.
Just talk to me. I love the accent. I'm an Anglophile anyway, so.
You're related to Noah. He's like royalty and everybody. Well, actually, because we're talking about reincarnation today, your book is the Big Book of Reincarnation.
Yep.
So, I mean, you never know what kind of blood you got in you, Roy.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be... That's an interesting point. It wouldn't be in my blood, but it would be in my soul, you see. So that's going deeper, isn't it?
Well, see, you're roiled down to your soul.
I don't know. The truth of the matter is that I don't have any past life memories at all, but I'm fascinated by people that do, and I've spent a lot of time researching cases and following the work of researchers. And the book has got more than 100 cases in it. Many of them are like scripts from movies. I mean, the intricate relationships that develop within families when a child begins talking about a past life gives enough information that they can go off and check it and then find the family that the child used to belong to. And then sometimes relationships develop that are not so good because the past life family claims they have some sort of ownership over the child since it can remember them. And obviously there's a bit of a tug of war, but often they all come to some happy agreement and the child spends some time with the past life family and some with its present family. And
really?
Gets you lots of presents at Christmas as well, I should think.
Now, I apologize ahead of time. My brother, actually, I'm coming right from the hospital. My brother and his wife had a baby, and it was kind of, I got the call like, hey, you better get to the hospital now, and I wasn't able to bring the book. So I don't have anything to reference back, and I apologize. It's totally my fault. But, we got a baby out of the deal.
Well, that's all that matters.
So forgive me for not being able to reference back to your book, but how did you get started studying for reincarnations?
It goes right back to my teenage years when I was very interested in UFOs at the time.
Oh, yeah?
And Lord Dowding, who was Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding, who was a hero of the Second World War here in Britain, he was the person in charge of the Battle of Britain, was also a spiritualist, and he spoke. First of all, he spoke about UFOs soon after the war, and said he had come to the conclusion that they were interplanetary craft. And that sort of got me hooked on him, and I began reading things that he'd written, and he wrote about spiritualism and spirit communication and receiving messages from soldiers and airmen that had died in the Second World War, and he was able to pass those messages on to their loved ones. And he also said that he believed in reincarnation. It actually got him into a lot of trouble because he began talking about the law of karma and who he felt had been affected by karma. But that's a different story. I won't go down that road at the moment. But because of that, I began taking quite a deep interest in the subject, looking for evidence rather than opinion on it, and finding in time that there were a handful of researchers that had really dedicated their lives to going off in search of good cases of spontaneous reincarnation recall, by which I mean that it is usually a child who, from the moment he or she can speak, begins talking about a past life that they remember. Often not in very flattering terms about their present life. They might be complaining about the food they're given or the clothes they have to wear. There's one little boy in India that complained bitterly that in his past life he was driven everywhere in a car. But the thing about these cases is that the kids are able to provide enough information, names, places, events, etc., that the family or others can go off and check those details. And some of them are quite fantastic.
Now, I want to ask you, we've had people in the show before talking about past lives and things like that. We've had guests say that our dreams kind of are telltales of
past lives.
Of past lives. Have you come across anything like that, or is that hooey?
I would have to know about the dream. I guess it could be. I think the evidence suggests, and I need to make this clear, that the book provides what I hope is, for most readers, very strong evidence that some people have reincarnated. Whether that enables us to go as far forward as saying that everybody reincarnates, I don't know. But the indications are that some people reincarnate, and that for some individuals, the memories of a past life come to the surface and they can talk about it, whereas with others, it remains under the surface, but it filters through. So a child might have some very strange dietary tastes or unusual taste in clothing, or maybe the toys he or she wants to play with. And it could well be, therefore, that if they are due to past life memories that have carried over into their present life, that past life memories might also infiltrate from the subconscious into dreams. So I think that's quite possible.
Lola, you got a question real quick?
Well, it's just, I've really been fascinated by this, and we've had some guests on in the past that have said they could regress me back and, and let me explore the idea that I've had past lives. But with this dream, only one time have I had a dream that was it was different than any other dream I've ever had. It was extremely real, and I could feel and smell, things in this dream, and it stuck with me. Most of the time, you wake up and you go, oh, I'll remember this, and after just a couple minutes of being awake, it slowly starts to filter away, and within a half hour, you can't remember anything but the most basic things to it. And with this one, I remember the names in it, and it was different than any dream that I've ever had before. And then for a couple, like psychics or mediums have said things too. But my big fear is like that little boy in India, is that at some point in time I was really wealthy and now I'm not. And it's like, I want to go back. I don't want to go forward here. So, but yeah, I really, that's why Jordan walked in, he goes, you're really going to like this guest because it's about reincarnation. And I've always kind of felt that there is something just below the surface that is a little bit different than the way I was raised, that kind of thing. And I'd like to be regressed. Watch have been really poor, and but. Oh.
Well, it's an interesting point, and I make the distinction in the book between cases that I refer to as spontaneous cases, which is always or nearly always children who begin talking about their past lives almost from the moment they can first speak, and that finishes by the time they're about 6 years old. The memories fade, and those memories are overtaken by their present life. It's much more exciting things happening, I guess. But that is a phenomenon that occurs in whatever culture a case is reported from, that the memories will fade. Now, with the regression, hypnotic regression, that's very different. We're talking about adults being regressed and remembering past lives. And a lot of people do that and find it absolutely fascinating. The problem with those cases, I have to say, is that by the time we are regressed as adults, we've all been exposed to so much material from books, newspapers, movies, whatever, that it's difficult to be sure that we haven't absorbed some of that information that we're now regurgitating as a past life memory, but in fact it is just things we've read that we rather were drawn to, and maybe having read it thought, oh, I wish I'd lived that life, and it comes out as a past life memory. So we have to be very cautious about regression cases and taking them at face value, unless they can be researched very thoroughly and other sources of information can be eliminated.
All right, now when people, well, this would be hard if you're dealing primarily with kids, but would it not, there was a show on here in the States that was on only one season and they got rid of it, but what it was people coming back into another body, but you would have to find the timeline exactly, because you would have to die and then somebody else then be born for you to be born in that body. You know what I'm saying? That there would have to be this pretty exact timeline, because I don't think your soul just kind of sits around in a waiting room. So I think that would be really hard to research, to try and come up with some, I don't know, background or something on a previous life.
You make a very interesting point, because in most cases the soul does seem to sit around waiting in a waiting room or wait somewhere. Most children, and I'm looking at those cases mostly, who recall a past life which is corroborated by research, their birth may take place 6 months or 6 years after the death that they in their previous life that they remember. So, I mean, if we accept that the soul is immaterial, it's a spiritual thing, it doesn't need a physical existence.
Right.
But it comes into a physical existence at certain times to live a life, there's no reason why it can't be in a sort of spiritual waiting room in another dimension until the right moment arrives, and then it can be reborn. However, there's a sect called the Druze who, there are quite a few living in the States, but they're mostly to be found in Israel, Syria, and Lebanon, and they're an offshoot of Islam, and reincarnation is the cornerstone of their belief. But they believe something quite strange to my mind, which is that when you die, you don't lose a breath. The moment your last gasp in your last life is followed by your first gasp in your new life, and that's exactly what you were talking about. Somehow it has to be orchestrated, theoretically, that a newborn baby is arriving at the moment you die, in order for your soul to go zap and get into the new body. They believe that. It's part of their belief, but I have to say the cases, I went to Lebanon on 2 visits to make a TV documentary about children remembering past lives, and some of the cases we looked at didn't have that happening. There were periods between death and rebirth. And I spoke to the spiritual leader of the Druze about this, and his explanation was, that they would have gone into another body, but that child would have only lived 6 months or 9 months and then died, and now they've come into the body that they have the memories in, but they can't remember that interim life.
No, it kind of goes with like Lily says in the chat room, is there a concept of time, outside of our existence? How would you know you were in a waiting room, or if time wasn't?
Indeed. Yeah.
But I do have a question, and this is something that always gets me about reincarnation, because I mean, I'm not really a believer, so I don't want to offend or anything like that. But let's say back in the day, whenever life started, there was life created, or however, whatever your beliefs are, whether it be evolved or, by God, you had your life. Well, those people died and it would go to somewhere else. Well, where does the new life come from? Because now we have, 6.7, 6.8 billion people on the earth that, are new. That they're not old, reincarnated people, because there weren't enough people that have died to go into the new bodies, because there's more and more and more.
Yep. Well, the same problem, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, the same problem arises. Souls must be coming from somewhere. There must be a soul factory somewhere churning them out. But maybe the explanation could be, and I'm just theorizing, and others have done the same, that we are all part of one huge group soul as human beings, and that we can exist simultaneously, even in, or an aspect of our soul could exist simultaneously in more than one body. And that might sound absurd, but even the Dalai Lama in a previous incarnation was said to have overlapped his lives by a period of a few months, so that he was reborn before he died, if that makes sense. But it does raise all sorts of issues on time as well, and there's a fascinating area of research that involved future lives where people were progressed rather than regressed, to look at what life they might be leading both in the future, in this life, but also in future incarnations. The problem with that research is that it's so far ahead that none of us will be around to know whether they were right or wrong in what they told us.
Yeah, that could be a problem. But, like with the Dalai Lama, though, I know with my mom, just before she passed, she was like in two different places. She was not completely here.
Is usually put forward that is evidence of a past life. Patton certainly believed he could remember several past lives. The question is, though, if it's usually called déjà vu, where you suddenly think you are recognizing something. But that's a phenomenon of the brain that can usually be easily explained. But in these cases where he tells people what's going to be around the next corner before he's got there, that's not déjà vu. That's prediction or precognition, if you like, or remembering a past life. So yeah, I think it's indicative. It wouldn't hold up. Skeptics would pull it apart and say, there was no evidence. Who did he tell? Did they write it down? And blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that it could well be one of these many cases, like dreams, as we were discussing before, that just bubble to the surface at a certain time if you're in the right place and something reminds you of that past experience.
Oh. This is all like really crazy stuff to me. For those of you listening on the podcast later after it's uploaded, I did lose a few minutes of audio. I guess I have a bad wire somewhere, and I apologize for it. Tell us, what is your favorite case of reincarnation that you've read? Like, because I'm sure there's a favorite story that you have that you just like every time you think about it or you talk about it, you're just like, man.
I've got several, actually.
Okay.
I'll limit it to one, because it's a particularly interesting one, and it was one of the first TV documentaries I saw many years ago on reincarnation. It was black and white, and it was a vivid account of a little boy in India called Titu Singh, who could remember a past life. He began talking about it soon after he was born. He gave the names of his parents, the names of his children. He said that he in his past life he had been Suresh Verma, and he'd run sort of a video shop, I think it was. It was not a video in those days. It would have been a recording shop or something. But it was in Agra, near the Taj Mahal.
Uh-huh.
Now, and then he said that he had been shot and killed, and then he suddenly found himself in this new family, and he wasn't very happy. He wanted the family to send a message to his children to say that he was just, he'd found himself in this sort of little body, and he was just staying there for a while until he could go and fetch them. And quite pathetic in a way. What's really interesting about it was he was taken with TV cameras to the shop that he said he could remember, and they confronted his past life wife. He told her things that she said only he could have known, and she was immediately satisfied with his story. His parents from that life also were convinced by his story. And what was particularly interesting was on this TV documentary, someone got an electric razor and shaved his head to show two scars on his head where the bullet that killed him would have gone in as an entry wound and came out as an exit wound.
Wow.
And that bowled me over. Now, I always assumed that was just a one-off case, but in fact, Professor Stevenson, that I remembered before, talked about before, did an enormous amount of research into cases with birthmarks and birth defects, where these anomalies, if you like, coincided exactly with wounds that the person they remembered being had suffered either at death or before death in their previous life. A lot of them were bullet wounds. Some were missing fingers off a hand. A girl in Burma who was born without a leg, half a leg from below the knee on one of the legs, and these sort of very unusual birthmarks and birth defects. On their own, they're not proof of reincarnation, but when, as happens in these cases, the children have very vivid memories of a life that coincides with these marks, then it brings a new dimension to reincarnation research and is physical evidence, if you like, as well as memories.
That is...
Wow.
Yeah. Because if you stop and you think about that, then that could not explain, but why there would be birth defects or birthmarks. That's just, wow, okay.
It's one of those things that, like I said, as a non-believer, it makes you say,
Well, that's why I've written the book, because I'm aware there are a lot of non-believers out there, and I was also aware of how many good cases like this one have been written up in scientific journals and parapsychological journals. They seldom get out into the public domain, and I think if more people were aware of them, I'm not trying to make people believe in reincarnation. I haven't got any particular reason to do that. I'm just saying, hey, take a look at these cases. There's much better evidence than you probably think. And having read it, come to your own conclusion. But if these cases are not cases of reincarnation, then, show me a better alternative explanation. And so far, nobody has.
Because the most you could say is coincidence.
Yeah.
That would be the only argument.
Yeah, coincidence has to be taken. There are lots of alternative explanations that the researchers have to take into account and dismiss before they can say that the case is strong evidence for reincarnation. But In fact, can I tell you one other story? Which
you can. We got a phone call real quick for you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, this is Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Okay, to your guest and to Lola, this is just a coincidence about Detroit, Lola, but way back when I was 4 or 5 years old, now that's about as far back as I believe most people can remember stuff, right? I had these visions of being a little boy walking downtown with my dad in Detroit, Michigan. Now, that's the only vision I have. And being a wee little boy, I wouldn't have had any memories before that, and something must have happened right around that time. I must have died because I had no visions of it after that. But when I was 4 or 5 years old, I asked my mother, what's a Detroit? And she said, are you talking about a town? Now, how else would that name come to me, you know? So that's my experience.
Wow, that's interesting. What do you think about that, Roy?
Yeah, I think lots of people have those sort of strange experiences. Unfortunately, they're often as fleeting as Bill's experience, and not enough to be researched or confirmed. But it could well be, that he was remembering that. Let me just tell you about this case because
thanks for your call, Bill.
And it's a particularly interesting one because you mentioned coincidence.
Uh-huh.
With the birthmarks, what Professor Stevenson realized very soon was that in a lot of cases particularly where shootings, guns are involved, there's more than one wound because the bullet doesn't normally stay lodged in the body. It usually passes through and comes out. And so he went to interview a Turkish guy who could remember being a bandit. It's a long story, and it's all in the book, but basically his two sisters had been raped and murdered, and he and his brother had found the culprits and murdered them, and then they were on the run from the police. And eventually the police surrounded the house in which they were hiding up, and they didn't want to be taken captive, so the elder brother shot his other brother, and then committed suicide by putting a rifle under his chin and using his toe to trigger it and shoot himself through the head, and he died. Now, this little boy could remember that in detail. He gave lots of evidence about the case and his story. All coincided. I have to say that this particular bandit was celebrated in that area, and probably it wouldn't have been difficult for the little boy to hear that story from other sources. However, he was able to give quite a bit more evidence that wasn't generally known, and he showed when he was born, he had a wound under his chin that was bleeding at the moment of birth, and I believe he had to go to the hospital to have it stitched up. Now, all the family could only remember him having that one birthmark under his chin. But after he did his research, Stevenson said, well, if that did coincide with the self-inflicted wound, his chin, there must have been an exit wound. And he went back to interview him again and said, is that the only birthmark you have? And he said, no, I do have one on top of my head. No one sees it because I've got hair covering it. But it was shaved off, and there, sure enough, was another wound, which would have coincided exactly with the exit wound of the bullet. So,
wow.
One wound might be a coincidence. Two is maybe stretching it a little further.
I just find that so fascinating. Jeez.
I remember watching a show a long time ago, and it was one of these offshoot, shows that like Discovery Channel have every now and then. But it was of a little boy who was born, and I think it was over in your neck of the woods, that he could remember everything. Like, the kid was only like 5 or 6, but remembered everything from his past life. And I mean, would draw pictures of the house, where it was, his yard, his farm, the whole deal. Well, his family decided, you know what, let's check this out. And like, it was like in another country, and they ended up taking a trip to the country. The kid gave the directions, how to get there, and the house was the same color as the pictures, looks just like the pictures. They found the family that was living there that had the relative die, had a photo album of the dog that the kid was drawing in the pictures, like crazy stuff like that.
Mm. Well, it's very common. There are so many cases like that. The problem for skeptics is that often it's the family that does the research, and then they start raising questions about how much information the family may have given the child, etc., which is why we try to hear of cases as soon as possible so that independent researchers can get involved. I've got a blog on which I discuss a whole range of paranormal subjects.
Now, you can give out the website if you want.
Okay, it's paranormalreview.com, and on that I've discussed various cases in the past, but I will continue monitoring cases, and if anybody wants to send me information about cases they have which they feel are strong enough to be investigated, I'd be pleased to try and follow them up. But I do urge people to try and, if they want to do it themselves, to get independent people to assess the information.
That's paranormalreview.com?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's anybody out there, if they got anything, weren't you want to tell your dream that you had to see if you get something like that?
Well, it's got to be something that it's got to have enough detail to be able to be checkable by somebody.
Well, see, there's a character in it, a little girl, Anna Lupo. And so I honestly, it has to be, because it's like, I think World War II, but, the name stuck with me. So I just kind of Google searched, and nothing popped up. But if it's like a German name or Polish or anything like that, I may not even be spelling it, the right way. Like I said, it was just so vivid and for the name to stick with me. And the first thing I did, actually, when I got to work the next day, was there's a couple people here that are avid readers like I am. And that's what I ask them. Do you remember a character in a book named Anna Lupo? Because that was the first thing I thought of was, okay, I picked the name up from a book or a movie or something like that, and no one can remember, a character like that in any work of fiction. But, I've Googled it, and I've kind of played around with it, because it's really, for a dream to stick with me that long, it really did bother me. And I was really upset. You know how sometimes the feeling doesn't leave you, and It was very distressing. I was trying to save a bunch of little kids, and it was the Nazis, and they were coming, and they had machine guns, and we were in a forest, and I just remember her. I grabbed her. Anna, we've got to go. Anna, we've got to go. And it just, yeah, it was really.
Well, since it was in a dream, and it's not a recurring dream, I guess you only had that one dream.
Yeah.
I would say some sort of regression would be the only way you could delve deeper into that if you chose to.
Well, we had a guest on a couple times now, actually, and he has a family that lives, I don't know, Johnstown's probably a good 50 miles from here. And he's been back to visit family a couple times, but he actually lives in California. And he said, well, I can regress you over the phone. And I remember telling Jordan at the time, I'm afraid of doing, what if I can't get back? What if he puts me under and he's in California and something happens and you can't.
Yeah, the line goes dead.
Yes.
Back. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've kind of, if I can find somebody locally to do that.
We don't know her safe word.
Well, yeah, what, that would be awful. I could be floating around in like cyber universe forever. But I just really, I have wanted to do that for the longest, because I've always felt that there's things that just aren't right with, different from me and from my family. And, and I've always kind of thought, maybe I lived before.
Well, here am I encouraging you to do that, but I've never done that myself because I don't have much curiosity. Mind you, I haven't had a dream like that either, but I don't really have much curiosity about any past life I might have led. My view is that I'm here to lead this life, and I shall get on, enjoy it, and make the most of it.
Well, like I said, boy, if I would remember being fabulously wealthy or something, I would be really upset. Oh.
But that might be your next life.
Ah, that could be.
Thank
you, Roy.
She just wants it so bad that she's experiencing it now.
I know. Isn't that awful?
Well, Roy, we are out of time. I want to thank you very much for being a part of the show.
This has been wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I knew Lola would just love it.
Yeah. This has been a good hour.
Well, I've enjoyed it, and perhaps I doubt that we've converted you, Jordan, but maybe a second read of the book might do that.
Well, I'll give her another read. For your blog, paranormalreview.com. Can they get your book from that site as well?
They can, and it's also available on Amazon, and it should be available in the bookshops as well by now, I should think. So.
And it's called The Big Book of Reincarnation.
That's it.
Yeah.
And, of course, the author, Roy Stemman. Thank you very much. We'll try to get in touch with you again. This is a lot of fun.
Good. I enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
You were right, Jordan.
Well,
I know.
who knows you?
I know.
We've been working side by side for 4 years now.
I know.
I think we just hit our 4-year mark.
Yes.
I think it was like June 8th or something like that.
Really? We started in the summer?
I think we did.
I think we did.
I'm about 99%. I have to double check, but in my heart.
4 years. Oh, Joe, you need to Facebook me a message here. Remember he said a while ago that he thought they were going to use something of his on faked or fact?
Fact or fiction?
Yeah,
fiction or...
whatever that is. Well, the other day I was just kind of scanning, and there was one that said something about Florida UFO film. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's it, because it was like supposed to be on I-10, which is the road that runs from New Orleans all the way across.
Is that what the video was?
Yeah, but it was, and then they're talking and they said, and the videographer, Joe, and I'm going, oh my God, it's got to be him, it's got to be him. It wasn't, it was somebody else named Joe. But they never did, they could never discount that video. And then they had all these cameras out and they were trying to do things like on airboats with lights and everything, and they kind of
trying to recreate it.
Yeah,
okay.
And they kind of did with the airboat, with the exception that when this guy shot it, he could hear nothing, and an airboat is really loud.
Yeah.
So then they put cameras up and down this river, and then one of them stayed back to watch the camera monitors, and 2 of them went out on a boat, and they caught some film of lights on IR that was absolutely incredible. It was a stationary light. There were like 5 lights in a row, and then another went off to the side a little bit. And then all of a sudden, that one off to the side just went up and
really
gone. And they were flabbergasted. And they, that's their job, is to fake the, actually recreate this stuff. And they couldn't.
That's
couldn't.
awesome.
They had no idea what it was.
Wow. I'll have to watch that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good episode. I don't usually care for that show because they're trying to act all really cool. Like, oh, we're just buds sitting around discussing. And it is so scripted, it's awful, But that was a good show. And it's that whole corridor there that Joe has gotten lost on. Sometimes that I-10, because it goes right from, they were just outside of Pensacola, but that's the one that goes through Mississippi and the NASA place.
He said, it looks like the one he took in Glen Rose.
But that wasn't his, though, was it? No, because the Joe they had as a videographer was not Joe.
Oh, wow.
Well, not our Joe. So, what?
My brain just lost for a second. I won't be here next week.
No, you won't.
I'm on my honeymoon next week, and it'll be 2 weeks because I'm getting going to be in Williamsburg, and then I'm going to be in Myrtle.
Okay,
So 2 weeks. I will not be here. Lola, you're going to be playing some reruns?
Yeah.
Okay, so the show will be here. It'll just be some old show that you can enjoy, and it'll be amazing to your ears.
Ones that we've enjoyed doing.
You know.
Yeah.
That old chestnut.
Okay. All right.
Until until 2 weeks from now. Don't be afraid, everybody. Only believe.